What you are about to hear is the story of a man who spent 2 years pretending he was already dead, and the one mistake that nearly cost him everything a second time. Stay until the end, because the moment he finally speaks the truth out loud is the same moment most people lose what they love most, by staying silent one beat too long. Caleb Whitlock watched her from the Pine Ridge, a woman in a worn coat, dragging timber twice her own weight across frozen ground, alone in a world that had forgotten how to be kind. He had ridden past that same spot every morning for 2 weeks, and every morning his chest tightened around something he thought he had buried alongside his wife. The woman below worked without pause, notching logs with practiced hands, her breath forming pale clouds in the November cold. No neighbors came, no help arrived, just her and the half-built cabin frame rising stubbornly against the Montana sky. Memories struck him like a fist. His wife Eleanor had wanted to build a home together, the winter before the fever took her. He had never done it. Now he was watching a stranger accomplish what he himself never had the courage to start. The town called her Rosalind Hale. She stopped to warm her hands by a small fire, and the firelight caught her face, young, determined, carved by hardship into something fiercer than pretty. Caleb knew that look. He had seen it in his own mirror 2 years earlier, before grief had worn every expression off his face completely. Why was she alone? The question gnawed at him for days. Women did not build cabins single-handed out here unless something had gone terribly wrong. His horse shifted beneath him, restless, and Caleb tightened the reins, torn between riding down to help and riding away to forget he had ever seen her. Guilt warred with curiosity. Here is something worth remembering for your own life. Grief does not protect you. It only feels that way. It builds a wall between you and the world, and convinces you the wall is keeping you safe, when really it is just keeping you locked inside with the pain. The same way Caleb had been locked inside his for 2 long years. Watching this stranger felt like betrayal to him, and yet he knew he would be back tomorrow. The watching had become ritual, his only emotional tether to anything beyond the emptiness. Then Rosalind looked up, suddenly, directly at the ridge. Their eyes met across 200 yards of open grassland. For one breathless moment, neither of them moved. Then Caleb pulled his horse back into shadow and disappeared into the pines below. Rosalind returned to her work, but her hands shook slightly as she lifted the next log. 3 days later, the storm came. Rosalind hammered canvas over the exposed walls as snow began to fall, fat flakes that promised a long and dangerous night. The wind picked up, tearing at the tarp. She was losing the race against the weather, and panic edged into her movements. Hoofbeats, she spun, reaching for the rifle propped against the cabin frame. A man emerged from the white curtain of snow, the watcher from the ridge, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. He dismounted without asking permission and began unloading nails, rope, heavy canvas, dried meat wrapped in burlap. Rosalind raised the rifle. "I do not need charity," she said. "Not charity," he answered, his voice rough from disuse. "Neighborly sense. Storm will rip that canvas clean off by midnight." "And what is your price, neighbor?" He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something in his eyes that made her finger ease off the trigger. Loneliness recognized itself. "Just let me work," she said, lowering the rifle but keeping it close. They worked in tense silence as the storm built around them. He moved with quiet competence, securing tarps with practiced knots, reinforcing weak points she had missed. He did not speak again. By full dark, the cabin was battened down, groaning but holding against the wind. He tied off the last rope and walked to his horse without a word. "Wait," Rosalind called. He turned. "Who are you?" Caleb Whitlock. Thank you, Mr. Whitlock, he nodded once and rode into the blizzard. Rosalind stood in her partially protected cabin, listening to the storm rage, confused and unsettled by the stranger who had helped without asking for anything in return. In her experience, men always wanted something. "Why would you help me?" she whispered to the empty space. "Nobody helps me." At his ranch, Caleb unsaddled his horse with numb fingers. His foreman, old Silas, watched from the barn door. "Boss, you almost smiled just now." Caleb did not answer, but Silas was right. He had spoken more words to that woman than to anyone in 6 months. Sunday morning at the chapel was cold in more ways than one. Caleb sat in his usual back pew, staring at the preacher without hearing the words. His mind was on the ridge, on canvas tarps and a woman's suspicious eyes. Rosalind Hale entered late. The congregation noticed 40 heads turning as one, whispers rippling like wind through wheat. She took the only available seat, front row, isolated. The town matriarch, a woman named Edith Calloway, leaned toward her daughter and spoke just loud enough to carry. "Some women have no shame, building homes in isolation like that. What kind of decent woman lives alone?" The sermon droned on about righteousness and community. Caleb barely listened. His thoughts had traveled backward to 2 years ago, Eleanor dying of fever in their bedroom, their unborn child lost with her. He had delayed sending for the doctor, thinking she would improve. She did not. He had blamed himself ever since. Guilt had become his armor, keeping the world at a safe distance. His ranch was successful but empty, a monument to loneliness that everyone respected and no one questioned. This is worth sitting with, because it plays out in real towns and real families constantly, not just on the frontier. A community will judge a person's circumstances without ever asking what hardship created them. Rosalind's husband had died in a dispute the year before, and the town had blamed him as a troublemaker. She inherited his shame without ever choosing it. People confuse pain for character everywhere, and it is one of the easiest ways to push good people out of your life, simply by judging them before you bother to understand them. After the service, Edith Calloway positioned herself near the chapel steps like a spider in a web. Rosalind walked past with her head high, ignoring the pointed looks. Caleb made his decision. He crossed the churchyard and nodded to Rosalind, a simple acknowledgement but witnessed by everyone. Edith's voice rang out. "Strange company you are keeping, Caleb Whitlock." The congregation waited. Caleb faced the fork in his road. Retreat to safe isolation or step forward into risk. He chose risk. "Miss Hale," he said, tipping his hat. "Mr. Whitlock," she replied. Her voice was steady, but surprise flickered in her eyes. "Storm did not take your walls down." "No, it did not. Thank you." That afternoon, Caleb rode to her land, not to the ridge this time, but directly to the cabin. Rosalind watched him approach. He dismounted, picked up a saw from her tool pile, and met her eyes. "If you will have the help, I will help you build." Rosalind studied him for a long moment, weighing risk and trust. Finally, she nodded once. "Then you had better know how to notch timber properly," she said. The distance between them closed. 2 weeks passed. The cabin took shape. They developed a rhythm. Caleb arrived at dawn, worked until dark, spoke little but accomplished much. Walls rose. The roof frame took form. The work was hard and good, and Caleb felt something in his chest loosen, something that had been clenched tight since Eleanor died. Rosalind learned fast. He taught her proper notching techniques, how to read wood grain, where to place support beams. Their hands touched briefly, passing tools, a charged moment both noticed and neither acknowledged. Evening meals by firelight became ritual. Conversations remained sparse but carried weight. "Your husband built before?" Caleb asked one night. "Ben? No, he was a ranch hand. Died in a range dispute last year. Rosalind's voice stayed matter-of-fact. Town blamed him as a troublemaker. I inherited the shame. Caleb nodded, understanding more than she had said. Town's good at blame, he said quietly. The next morning, they discovered half of Rosalind's timber pile had been stolen overnight, winter wood she could not afford to lose. Her face went pale with rage and fear. I will find it, Caleb said. It is not. I will find it, she started. He was already moving. He tracked the thieves to a drifter camp 5 miles out. 3 men, drunk and careless. Caleb recovered every log and delivered a warning cold enough to freeze blood. When he returned the wood to her property, she was waiting. You did not have to do that. Yes, he said, I did. That night, Caleb dreamed of Eleanor. He woke feeling guilty, as though helping Rosalind was betraying his wife's memory. The next morning, he arrived distant and quiet. Rosalind noticed immediately. She set down her hammer and looked at him. Grief is not betrayal, Caleb. The dead do not want us dead too. Her words cracked something open in his chest. He nodded, unable to speak, and returned to the work with new intensity, building not just a cabin, but something within himself. The blizzard hit without warning. One moment they were working the roof frame, the next, the world disappeared into white. Temperature plummeted. Wind howled like a living thing. They sealed themselves inside the half-finished cabin, canvas walls, gaps in the roof, the small stove barely adequate against the cold. The storm raged for 2 days. Proximity forced vulnerability. They shared a single wool blanket by the stove, shoulders touching, watching firelight dance on incomplete walls. Tell me about him, Caleb said. Your husband. Rosalind was quiet for a long moment. Ben was flawed, quick temper, poor judgment sometimes, but kind. He loved me in his way. She paused. I loved him, but he is gone. I am still here, still living. No idealizing, just truth. Your wife, Rosalind asked. Caleb stared into the flames. Eleanor, fever took her and our baby 2 years back. I waited too long to ride for the doctor. Thought she would improve. His voice cracked. I watched her die. I have been watching life ever since. Watching you build. Watching from that ridge. Because maybe I am only good at watching. Rosalind turned to face him. Then stop watching and start living. The words hung between them like a dare. Caleb looked at her. Really looked. And saw someone as broken and as brave as himself. He kissed her. Tentative, terrified, real. Rosalind froze for a heartbeat, then returned it. The cabin around them was unfinished, wind howling through the gaps, but warmth existed here beyond the stove. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. They did not need to. Morning came clear and bright. The storm had passed. They worked differently now, synchronized, aware of each other in new ways, careful not to name what had shifted. At noon, Silas arrived on horseback checking on Caleb. His knowing look said everything. Boss, town's talking. Edith Calloway has got her claws out. Caleb's stomach sank. His horse had been spotted at Rosalind's property overnight. Innocent explanations would not matter to people hungry for scandal. Let them talk, Rosalind said firmly. But Caleb's silence spoke louder than her defiance. The town council convened publicly 1 week later. Unusual, theatrical, orchestrated by Edith Calloway. Caleb stood in the town square, surrounded by familiar faces now cold with judgment. A rancher named Holt stood beside Edith, smirking. He had wanted Rosalind's land since Ben died. Edith's voice rang clear. We are concerned, Caleb, about your association with certain individuals. This community has standards. Rosalind Hale is a respectable widow, Caleb said. But his voice lacked conviction. I am helping a neighbor. Helping, Holt laughed. Is that what we are calling it now? Caleb felt the weight of 2 years of respectability pressing down. His position, his reputation, the town's approval he had never once questioned. He hesitated, searching for stronger words, and in that hesitation, everything crumbled. Here is the lesson worth carrying into your own life, because it shows up far more often than most of us would like to admit. The moment that costs you the most is almost never the dramatic one. It is the quiet hesitation, the half-second where you choose comfort over courage, silence over standing up for someone who needs you to speak. That single pause can undo months, sometimes years, of trust built one honest day at a time. If you want to keep the people and the life you have fought for, learn to recognize that hesitation in yourself before it costs you everything, the way it nearly cost Caleb everything twice over. Rosalind stood 30 feet away, half hidden by the mercantile doorway. She had come to town for supplies and heard everything. She heard him choose their approval over defending her. Without a word, she mounted her horse and rode away. Caleb saw her go, recognized his failure, and felt something die inside him, something that had just started to live again. He tried to follow. Rosalind refused to see him. "You chose their approval," she said through the cabin door, her voice flat. "I choose myself. We are done. Caleb, leave." That afternoon, Holt filed a legal claim against Rosalind's property, citing incomplete residence and Ben's unpaid debts. The deadline: finish the cabin and prove occupancy in 2 weeks or lose the land. At his ranch, Caleb sat alone with a whiskey bottle. Silas watched from across the room. "You spent 2 years dead, boss," the old foreman said quietly. "She woke you up. Now you are choosing the grave again." Caleb did not answer. He had no answer. 10 days passed. Rosalind worked alone, injured from a saw slip, the cabin still incomplete. Exhaustion carved shadows under her eyes. The dream of home was slipping through her fingers. Caleb spiraled, work, whiskey, isolation. His ranch thrived. He felt nothing. Silas tried again over breakfast. "Eleanor would be ashamed of you right now. Not for moving on, for giving up." The words landed like a blow. That afternoon, Caleb rode to the cemetery. He stood at Eleanor's headstone, snow falling around him, and spoke aloud the truth he had avoided. "I loved you, Maggie. I will always love you." His voice broke. "But I am still alive, and I have been choosing wrong, choosing fear, choosing death." He touched the cold stone. "She makes me feel alive, and I think you would want that for me." Permission granted to himself, from himself. Honoring Eleanor meant living fully, not dying slowly. Caleb rode straight to town. He found the counsel in the saloon and slammed Holt's fraudulent papers on the bar. "This claim is built on lies," Caleb said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ben's debts were paid. I have the receipts. Holt wants her land, not justice." Edith rose. "This is not about land. It is about cruelty." Caleb interrupted, dressed up as righteousness. "Rosalind Hale is worth 10 of you, Edith. She is braver, kinder, stronger than anyone in this room." He looked around at familiar faces. "You want to judge her? Judge me alongside her. I stand with Rosalind Hale." The room divided before his eyes. Edith's faction remained hostile, but others, younger families, the blacksmith, several ranchers shifted. Respect for courage outweighed appetite for scandal. Silas stepped forward. "I will help finish that cabin." "Me too," said the blacksmith. Others joined. At dawn, Caleb led a dozen men to her land. Rosalind met them, rifle ready, confused. Caleb dismounted and met her eyes. "I was a coward. I am here now. All of us. Let us help you build." Rosalind looked at him, at the men behind him, weighing trust against fear. Finally, she nodded once. "Then pick up a hammer," she said. 3 days of hard work transformed the property. The community that showed up was not the whole town, but it was the better half. Walls rose in coordinated effort. Roof secured. Door hung, floor laid. The cabin became a real, solid, sturdy home. Laughter rang out. Shared meals, collective pride, a communal spirit reclaimed from judgment. Rosalind and Caleb worked side by side. Few words, but constant awareness, trust rebuilding through action, one log at a time. On the third afternoon, Holt arrived with 4 hired men. He carried papers and wore a gun. "This property is under dispute," Holt announced. "You are all trespassing." The work stopped. Men reached for tools that could become weapons. Caleb stepped forward, Silas beside him. "The only trespasser here is you, Holt." Holt's hand moved toward his gun. Tension peaked, violence one heartbeat away. Rosalind walked through the line of defenders, deed in hand, and faced Holt directly. "This is my home," she said, voice steady as stone. "I am not leaving, and you are trespassing." The completed cabin stood behind her, proof of residence, proof of community, proof of will, stronger than greed. The sheriff, who had been watching from his horse, finally spoke. "She is right. Council reviewed your claim yesterday. Denied. You have got no business here." Holt looked at the unified faces around him and saw he had lost. He mounted his horse, face twisted with humiliation. "This is not over," he muttered. "Yes," Caleb said quietly. "It is." Holt rode away. The helpers departed as evening fell, leaving Rosalind and Caleb alone in the completed cabin. Lantern light warmed the log walls. The small space felt enormous with possibility. "I do not know how to do this," Caleb said. "I am still scared." "So am I," Rosalind replied. "But we build it one day at a time, like the cabin." He took her hand. She did not pull away. They stood in their completed work, not just timber and nails, but trust and second chances made tangible. Caleb pulled her close and kissed her. No hesitation this time, no fear. Outside, the first stars appeared. Inside, a home began. Spring arrived like a promise kept. Rosalind stood at the cabin door at dawn, coffee cup warming her hands. 3 months had passed. The cabin had evolved. Small garden planted, corral built for Caleb's horse, curtains in the windows, signs of 2 lives merging into one. Silas and the ranch hands came for Sunday supper now, found family forming around the couple, laughter replacing the silence that had defined Caleb's life for so long. That morning they walked to church together, Rosalind's hand in Caleb's, both ready to face whatever came. Some glares remained. Edith's faction, smaller now, bitter but irrelevant. Younger families greeted them warmly. The town was learning. Acceptance was not complete, but it was growing. After the service, they rode back to her land in comfortable quiet. On the porch that evening, they talked of the future, expanding the cabin, adding a room, maybe children someday, building forward, not just surviving. "You ever regret it?" Caleb asked. "The hard way." Rosalind smiled. "Every good thing worth having comes the hard way." She watched him work the corral in the fading light. He looked up, caught her watching, and smiled, rare, genuine, the smile of a man who had learned to live again. She smiled back. The cabin stood solid against the Montana sky. Wildflowers bloomed where winter frost had ruled. Smoke rose from the chimney, carrying the scent of home into the evening air. She had built her cabin one log at a time, each piece laid with stubborn hope against a world that wanted her to fail. He had built his courage the same way, one choice at a time, until fear became just another ghost to lay to rest. Together they built a home, not from timber and nails alone, but from harder materials, trust earned through action, second chances given and taken, and the quiet belief that even broken hearts can learn to beat again. If there is one thing worth taking from their story into your own life, it is this. Courage is almost never one dramatic act. It is choosing again and again in the small, quiet, unglamorous moments to show up instead of hide, to speak instead of stay silent when silence will cost someone everything, and to build instead of simply watch from a safe distance. Spring rain began, soft, renewing. Caleb and Rosaline stood together in the doorway, watching the land come alive. Home?